Hello, and welcome back to the Kindness Matters podcast. I am so glad that you're here today. If you're new to the show, welcome. This is a space where we talk about how kindness, connection, and compassion can change the world around us. Not in a naive way, not in a way that ignores hard things, but in a way that asks the question, what does it actually look like to treat people with dignity, especially when systems and structures make that difficult? Today's episode is a solo one, which I don't do often, but this topic felt like something I needed to sit with you on quietly, without the noise that sometimes creeps in when these things get discussed. The question I want to explore today is, what happens to a community and to the people in it when large groups of people start to feel like their voice doesn't matter? And maybe, more importantly, what do communities do about it? How do people respond? Not with bitterness, not by giving up, but with something that actually looks like kindness and courage and grace. Let's talk about that. I want to start with a feeling, not a statistic, not a headline, a feeling. Think about a time when you were in a group, a meeting, a family dinner, a neighborhood gathering, and no matter what you said, it felt like the decisions had already been made, like the table had been set before you even arrived, like your presence was acknowledged, but your voice wasn't really heard. That feeling has a name. Researchers call it political powerlessness or civic alienation, but most of it would just call it being left out. Now scale that feeling. Imagine not just a meeting, but a whole community, a neighborhood, a county, a city, where generation after generation of people go to vote, go to show up, go to participate, and still find that the outcomes never seem to reflect them, that the lines drawn on maps or the rules set by those in charge always seem to work against them. This is not a new experience in American life. It's actually one of the oldest. And it's an experience that has shaped and continues to shape how communities either fracture or find ways to hold together. Now, I want to be really clear about something. Today's episode is not about politics. I'm not here to tell you which party is right or wrong, or how to wade into the debates happening in legislatures and courtrooms. That's not what this show is for. What I am here to do is ask a question that I think matters deeply to all of us, regardless of how we vote or what we believe. When people feel systematically excluded, when they feel like the system is rigged against them, what do the kindest, wisest communities do in response? Because that question, I believe, is one of the most important questions of our time. Let's look at what we actually know about exclusion and community health. Social scientists have spent decades studying what happens to communities when people feel like their participation doesn't count. And the findings are, honestly, both sobering and hopeful. The sobering part first. When people believe their voice doesn't matter, when they feel what psychologists call learned helplessness in civic life, the effects ripple outward in ways most of us don't expect. Trust in neighbors drops, volunteerism declines, mental health outcomes worsen, not just for those who feel excluded, but for everyone in the community. There's a fascinating body of research showing that inequality in civic power doesn't just hurt the people at the bottom of the power structure. It destabilizes the whole community. Robert Putnam, the Harvard political scientist who wrote the landmark book Bowling Alone, documented something remarkable. Communities with high levels of civic participation, where people felt their involvement actually mattered, had better health outcomes, lower crime, stronger schools, and more economic resilience. The opposite was also true. Communities where large groups felt shut out tended to see those same indicators move in the wrong direction. So, civic inclusion isn't just a political issue, it's a community health issue, it's a kindness issue. Now, here's where it gets hopeful. The same research that documents the damage of exclusion also documents the remarkable resilience of communities that decide together to push back, not always through protest, not always through politics, sometimes through something quieter and more powerful. Sociologist Robert Sampson spent years studying neighborhoods in Chicago, communities that, by every measurable indicator, should have been falling apart. High poverty, high unemployment, systems that seemed stacked against them. And what he found was that some of these communities were remarkably resilient, not because their problems went away, but because of something he called collective efficacy, the shared belief that neighbors could work together to make things better. Collective efficacy. I can't say it, but I love that phrase. It's basically a social science way of saying we believe in each other. And that belief, that stubborn, persistent belief that we matter to each other, turns out to be one of the most powerful forces in human community life, more powerful in many cases than the systems that try to diminish it. I want to share some stories with you, real stories, because data is important, but stories are how we understand what data means. Story 1. The Mothers of East Los Angeles. In the late 1980s, a community in East Los Angeles, predominantly Latino, predominantly working class, learned that their neighborhood had been selected as a site for a new state prison. They hadn't been consulted. The decision had been made without them. Now, this community had plenty of experience with feeling shut out. Many residents were immigrants or the children of immigrants. Their neighborhood had absorbed freeways and industrial facilities for decades, projects that wealthier communities successfully blocked. The pattern was familiar. Their voice, it seemed, didn't count. Something shifted. A group of women, mostly mothers, mostly from the local Catholic parish, organized, not violently, not bitterly. They walked in processions. They showed up at hearings, every hearing. They built relationships with other communities facing similar battles. They wrote letters. They knocked on doors. They prayed together, and they showed up together. Over several years, they defeated not just the prison proposal, but also a hazardous waste incinerator and an oil pipeline planned for their neighborhood. And in the process, they built one of the most durable grassroots civic organizations in California history. What strikes me about this story isn't just the victory, it's the method. These women, they were women who had every reason to feel powerless. And instead of accepting that feeling, they chose a different posture: togetherness, persistence, showing up with dignity. Story 2. The Loudness County Freedom Organization. Let's go back further. The 1960s, Loudness County, Alabama. At the time, this was one of the most dangerous counties in the South for Black Americans. Black residents made up 80% of the population and 0% of the registered voters. The exclusion wasn't subtle, it was enforced with violence. Into this context came the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, the SNCC, and a remarkable local organizer named John Hewitt. What they built together was called the Loudness County Freedom Organization. Its symbol was a black panther, chosen because a panther, when cornered, will defend itself. What I find remarkable about this story, from a kindness and community perspective, isn't just the courage it took to register voters in the face of genuine danger. It's what they built alongside that effort. Citizenship education classes, community meetings, a culture of mutual care and mutual accountability. People look after each other. They shared information. They showed up for each other's families when things got dangerous. The political goal was voter registration, but what they were really building was a community, one where people knew they were not alone. Now, John Hewitt later became the first black sheriff of Loudon County, but I'd argue the more important legacy is the culture of dignified, courageous civic participation that took root there and that planted seeds across the movement. Story 3. Something closer to home. I want to bring this closer to the present because you might be thinking, those are historical stories, and what does it look like today? Here's what I've observed in communities all across this country right now. When people feel excluded from formal power structures, something interesting often happens. They build parallel structures, not to tear down what exists, but to create something that actually serves them. Community land trusts where neighborhoods collectively own housing so that long-term residents can't be priced out. Mutual aid networks that organized during the pandemic and never stopped. Neighbors helping neighbors with groceries, medication, childcare. We saw all of that in Minneapolis in January. Participatory budgeting programs where cities actually give residents direct control over how a portion of public money gets spent. Neighborhood councils, community workers, health workers, block captains who know everyone on their street by name. These aren't political movements in the traditional sense. They're acts of civic love. They're communities saying, if the system won't include us, we will include each other. And here's what I find so striking. These efforts don't just address the immediate need. They rebuild trust. They rebuild the sense that your voice matters. They rebuild what Putnam called social capital and what Sampson called collective efficacy. They heal something. Now I want to get personal for a moment because this is, after all, the Kindness Matters podcast, and I want to talk about what kindness actually looks like in the context of civic exclusion. I think we sometimes misunderstand kindness. We think it means being nice, conflict avoidant, soft, but the kindness I've come to believe in, the kindness that actually matters, is something sturdier than that. It's the kindness that shows up when things are hard. It's the kindness that sees people who have been made invisible. It's the kindness that says, experience is real, your voice matters, and I will stand with you. Psychologist Kristen Neff, who has done beautiful work on self-compassion, talks about how genuine compassion is not about fixing everything or making hard feelings go away. It's about acknowledging suffering and choosing to respond with warmth rather than judgment or indifference. That's true on an interpersonal level, and I believe it's true on a community level too. When a community is experiencing civic exclusion, when people feel like the system is designed to render them voiceless, the kindest responses I've observed have a few things in common. First, they validate. They don't minimize or dismiss what people are experiencing. Quote, that must be frustrating, unquote. It's a start, but real validation goes further. I see why you feel that way. Your experience makes sense. What you're describing is real. There's something deeply healing about being witnessed and having your experience named and acknowledged by someone else. Second, they activate rather than paralyze. This is a subtle but crucial distinction. It's easy when confronting systems that feel overwhelming to spiral into helplessness or cynicism. The kindest leaders and neighbors I've seen are the ones who can hold the reality of the problem and the possibility of action at the same time. They don't pretend things are fine, but they also don't let the weight of what's wrong become a reason to stop moving. Third, they rebuild. They don't just resist, they create. They build relationships across differences. They build institutions that reflect the communities they serve. They build habits of showing up for each other. Because in the long run, a community that knows how to take care of itself is much more resilient than any policy change or court ruling. I think about a phrase from the late Congressman and civil rights icon John Lewis: "Do not get lost in a sea of despair." Unquote. He said that over and over again across decades of struggle against exclusion. Don't get lost in despair. Keep moving, keep building, keep showing up with grace. That is a kindness ethic, and it's also a survival strategy. So let's bring this home. What does this mean for you in your community, in your daily life? I want to offer a few simple things, not because they'll solve anything, but because I believe small actions multiplied across thousands of people are actually how the world changes. 1. Listen to understand, not to respond. If someone in your community, a neighbor, a colleague, a family member, expresses feeling like their voice doesn't count, resist the urge to immediately reassure or debate. Just listen, ask questions, seek to understand what they're experiencing. This is the most fundamental act of civic kindness that there is. 2. Show up. Attend a town hall. Go to a school board meeting. Participate in a neighborhood association. Not necessarily because you have a burning agenda, but because showing up signals that you believe community matters. Your presence changes the room. 3. Learn your community's history. Every community has a history of how it got to be the way it is, who was included in that story and who wasn't. Understanding that history humbly, honestly, is the beginning of building something better. 4. Connect across difference. The most powerful civic movements, the ones that actually changed things, were built on unlikely coalitions. People who didn't share everything in common, but who shared a commitment to each other's dignity. Look for those connections. Build them. Protect them. 5. Remember that kindness is not neutral. I want to say this gently but clearly. Choosing kindness in the face of injustice is not the same as staying out of it. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is stand with someone who is being excluded. Not loudly, not performatively, but faithfully. I started today by asking, what happens to a community when people feel like their voice doesn't matter? And I think the answer is both painful and beautiful. The pain is real. Exclusion damages people. It damages trust. It damages the social fabric that holds us together. We should never minimize that. But the beauty is also real, because again and again, across history and across this country right now, communities have found ways to hold each other up, to build something, to refuse the story that says their voices don't count, to practice imperfectly, persistently, the radical idea that everyone belongs. That's what kindness looks like at the community level. Not a greeting card sentiment, not a passive wish for things to be better, but an active, committed, sometimes costly choice to see people, to stand with people, and to believe that together we can do something about it. Thank you for being here for this conversation. It means a lot to me that you spend this time with me. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love it if you shared it with someone in your life, someone you think you might need to hear that voice that matters, because it does. Until next time, remember, kindness matters, and so do you.